Hi, I'm Jeff Kaszerman, Vice President of Government Relations at the New Jersey Society of CPAs, and thank you for joining us for this special edition of IssuesWatch Live. Today I'm joined by Ray Cantor. He's the Vice President of Government Affairs at the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. Thanks for joining us, Ray.
Nice to be here.
We invite you, our audience, to submit your questions via the comments box, or you can also email them to us at feedback@njcpa.org. We'll try to answer them either during the broadcast, or if research is needed, then we will host answers after the broadcast. We may not have answers to all of the questions, but we'll do our best. For those of you who are NJCPA members, remember that you can always post questions to the open forum on Connect at connect.njcpa.org. Well, it's been another eventful week. Governor Murphy signed a bill to officially extend many of the New Jersey's tax deadlines. We'll go through a list of what is and isn't extended, and then we'll talk about some new guidelines and financial relief that is now available to the self-employed, independent contractors, and gig workers. So let me start with the tax deadlines. It has been quite a journey to get here, to say the least. New Jersey was the last state to extend its deadlines, and that was one day before April 15th. So it was very crazy and uncertain most of the time. So let me talk about the facts. Let's get into what is and isn't extended. All 2019 gross income tax returns and payments that were originally due April 15th are now due July 15th. And this includes trusts. Also, all 2019 corporate business tax returns and payments that were originally due April 15th are now due July 15th. First quarter 2020 GIT and CBT estimated tax payments are now due July 15th. So now here comes the somewhat strange part. The second quarter estimated tax payments remain due June 15th. Yes, that means you'll be paying the second quarter before the first quarter. That's pretty strange. This is one of the changes that the NJCPA is continuing to advocate for. The IRS has extended second quarter payments July 15th, and we want New Jersey to do the same. But until you hear otherwise, and hopefully you will, second quarter payments are due June 15th. Also extended to July 15 are partnership returns and payments, as well as first quarter 1041 estimates. All of these extensions are automatic. There's no need to file for an extension, and penalties and interest will not be charged. In addition to the second quarter estimated tax payments, there are a few other deadlines that have not been extended: sales and use tax, payroll tax, and inheritance taxes. It's also important to note that as of now, May 1st, property tax payments have not been extended. There is a bill calling for an extension to July 15th, but it is unlikely that bill will ever pass. So the New Jersey Division of Taxation has an updated list of all filing deadlines on their website. See the link on your screen to see those filing deadlines. The NJCPA and New Jersey Business and Industry Association are working together to get clarification on several issues from the Division of Taxation, such as how will installment agreements be treated? Will they follow the IRS, which has said that for taxpayers under an existing installment agreement, payments that are due that April 1st and between April 1st and July 15th are suspended. We're trying to find out if that's what the division will be doing. Will Pioneer, the collection agency, will they suspend their collection efforts? And if you happen to, if they have happened to reach out to you, please let us know you're being contacted by them, because we're trying to monitor the situation and what's happening with collections. We also want to know, will quarterly payments be allocated correctly so that they do not inadvertently cause an underpayment? And finally, how will retail establishments with a January 31st year end be treated regarding their May 15th payments? If you're joining us now, if you happen to be just joining us, welcome. I'm Jeff Kaszerman, Vice President of Government Relations at the NJCPA, and I'm joined by Ray Cantor, Vice President of Government Relations at the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. If you have any questions as we go along, please submit them in the comments or email them to us at feedback@njcpa.org. So, Ray, let's talk about unemployment and the benefits available. So, ordinarily, self-employed workers, independent contractors, and gig workers are not eligible for unemployment insurance. But earlier this week, the New Jersey Department of Labor issued new guidelines for how these folks can apply for pandemic unemployment assistance. Can you tell us about that?
No, absolutely, Jeff, and thanks for allowing me to speak here today to your membership. And what the Department of Labor, did earlier this week was really based on what Congress did a few weeks ago in passing the CARES Act. As you said, normally independent contractors and self-employed do not qualify for unemployment in case that their business shuts down or they lose their ability to work, etc. But this new law has now expanded unemployment insurance to those types of workers. So if you're self-employed, independent contractor, and because of the coronavirus has made it impossible for you to go to work, or you have the virus, or you're taking care of your children or someone at home who may be ill, you can qualify for unemployment insurance, and that could be a real benefit for these types of workers.
So let me ask you about something that I have heard among some of our members and some of your members, which is this issue of some workers being able to make more on unemployment insurance than at their jobs. And some of them, at least according to what I hear, some of the workers are not showing up for that reason. Is that correct? And if it is, what kind of impact is that having on businesses?
That's absolutely correct. One of the things that the CARES Act did is they passed the federal pandemic unemployment compensation provisions, which essentially, on top of what you were normally entitled to for unemployment insurance, it's an additional $600 a week more. I think it started the first week of April, and it will continue until the end of July. But that $600 a week, again, is on top of what you otherwise would have gotten. Even if you were only qualified for the minimum amount, it's $600 now on top of that. So what a lot of businesses are finding is that their employees who were making, maybe relatively low wages or even part-time at that point, they're finding that they're making a lot more money by not working. So, again, it's a quandary. Obviously, if an employer wants to bring an employee back, then they have every right to do that, and they don't qualify for unemployment. But it's a tough call for employers to force their workers back when their workers are making a heck of a lot more sitting at home and not taking the risk of being exposed to the virus.
Wow, that's very interesting. So they're getting the unemployment rate that they would normally get under normal circumstances plus an extra 600, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think the intent was to try to make workers whole by giving them this additional $600. But one of the things that Congress did not do, I'm not sure if it was intentional or, again, the whole CARES Act was passed in a week. So there may not have been a ton of the discussion going into it, but they didn't cap it at any level of what their prior income had been. So again, for a lot of people, they're making out fiscally better off by taking unemployment.
And that's an extra $600 a week?
$600 a week, yes.
Wow. I'm not going to work anymore.
Well, again, I think you don't qualify because you're healthy. Your association is open. So, no, Jeff, you don't qualify for this.
Oh, well, too bad. I have a question that just came in. This is from one of our members. I have a self-employed client that applied for unemployment. She is working through the process, but has since been funded for the PPP. And her question is, can she collect unemployment before the PPP and again once the 8 weeks end? Is she only ineligible during the 8-week period?
And again, so you've now segued to the PPP, and I'll talk about what that is in a second. One of the problems, let me just mention on the unemployment side, again, dealing with the self-employed, is that this is a new program being stood up for the first time. And you mentioned that guidance just came out from the New Jersey Department of Labor, this week. So, even though this law was passed several weeks ago, there's been a great deal of confusion as to how the process would work, who qualifies, how you qualify, how you show your income. So even though a lot of people may be qualified under this program, as an independent contractor, as self-employed, you now have to go into a system, into a computer program that's not meant to accept and look at your applications and make judgments. You then have to be denied, and then you're thrown into an appeals process where you now have to show what your income is. So, again, it gets a little complicated, but what we're finding out now is that it's taking people a long time to go through that process and to be able to get their money. I'm not aware, by the way, of any self-employed person who has begun receiving their monies in New Jersey yet. Some other states may be doing a little bit better job. They may be fronting money, whatever, but the process has not worked very well to this point in time for the self-employed, in that. Now, let me turn to want me to talk about what the PPP is first before to answer that question? Or
go right ahead.
So what the CARES Act did for small businesses, for independent contractors, for the self-employed, small businesses, is they stood up two different programs. One, unemployment, which we just talked about, but they also, under the Small Business Administration, set up a program where small businesses, again, independent contractors, et cetera, who otherwise never would qualify for loans from the SBA, could get loans to pay their payroll costs and other types of costs. And again, I said a loan program, but that loan can be entirely forgiven if certain, if the money is spent in a certain way over a certain period of time. And I'll get more into that in a moment, but let me answer that question first before people forget what the question was. So, if they applied for you can't be employed and or able to be employed and going into unemployment at the same time. So if that person basically is earning no wages now and they're waiting for the PPP, sure, they could probably be on unemployment so long as they meet those other qualifications where they can't work because of the virus, their work is shut down, et cetera. But once they get that PPP, then that money is supposed to be used to pay their wages, to pay their salaries. They have to be off of unemployment. And again, at some point in time, if their business is still closed, they probably can go back onto unemployment. I know that's a little tricky how that works, but and I probably need to explain the PPP program a little bit more so people understand why it's not maybe the total solution for everybody.
So, two things, Ray. The person whose scenario you just described, looking for unemployment while they're waiting for the PPP, the problem that those people are having is that the Department of Labor really doesn't have the computer system set up to handle that. So those people are in a situation where they're like, well, I should probably get this, but I don't know for sure because, I haven't even been able to apply. Is that correct?
Well, there are several problems with it. Again, the guidance just came out. The computer systems, probably aren't meant to handle this. I'm sure the Department of Labor is short-staffed because, their workers as well are, suffering from, having to work at home and through viruses. And not to mention, we have seen unprecedented unemployment claims since
Right.
March. I think over 700,000 people in New Jersey have filed for unemployment since March 5th. So, I think we're up to right now, in yesterday's figures, 19% unemployment in the state. So those numbers
right.
are staggering. And again, it's a system and the program that didn't exist before. And if you were a wage employee and you applied for unemployment, they already have records of all your wages, and they could, they knew the numbers. They could then start cutting the checks. With, self-employed, the Department of Labor doesn't have your wage information, so you now have to physically or in person, or not in person, but whichever mechanism, now submit probably 2 years worth of tax data to them, and they have to make determinations as to qualifications and amount of wages. So it's a whole new process, and that's delaying things. But if you qualify, you qualify, and even if you don't get your money for several weeks, you're still owed that money.
Okay, right. I guess, though, there's going to be some people who are going to be worried that, well, especially CPAs who are very cautious, I haven't been officially approved, so I'm worried, how do I know for sure that I will be? So that throws out a certain amount of uncertainty, which CPAs do not like.
No, understood. And if you can qualify for the PPP, you should have applied for that. But again, we need to talk more about the PPP. And one of the first things we need to know is that as of yesterday, they ran out of money. So if you have not applied for the PPP yet, at the moment, they're not taking any more applications until hopefully Congress comes back and refunds that program. But right now, that program is done for now.
Right. Yeah, it's. I was actually going to ask you about that after you finished talking about the PPP program.
Well, if you want to, let me.
Yeah, go
the
into
program,
the PPP.
It's still it's relevant for people who have applied, and hopefully, personally, I can't imagine Congress not standing this program back up again. It was $349 billion that basically was fully spent within a 2-week period of time. So it shows you what the demand was, for that program, and it's really the best program out there that Congress did under the CARES Act for small businesses, for self-employed, for the independent contractors, for the gig workers. And again, as I mentioned, the way the program worked, it's a loan program under the SBA. Unlike previous SBA programs, you don't have to show that you could pay the money back. You don't have to show that there were other sources of funding. You don't have to guarantee the money because the federal government was guaranteeing the money. So it's basically saying, hey, I think there's economic uncertainty. So I now qualify just because of that. You then have to, the amount you could qualify for is basically looking at your average monthly payroll cost over the last year times 2.5 times. So, if your average monthly payroll cost was $100,000, you qualify for $250,000. And so long as you spend that money over the next 8-week period, once you get the loan, 75% for your payroll costs, And then, the rest could go for mortgage interest, for rent, for utilities. The idea is to keep people off the unemployment rolls, to keep businesses, going for as long as for that 8-week period of time. And, it's meant to get them over the hump. If,
Right.
If any of that money, is not spent that way, or if you also have to have, by the way, the same amount of employees as you had before this all started, and you have time to bring them back off of unemployment. If you don't, then you lose the loan forgiveness. But that 8-week period of time, the money you spent properly is forgiven, and that money becomes a grant. So it's really basically free money if you spend it right.
Okay, so if this coronavirus, the emergency, let's say, lasts half a year, and the program for 2 months outside of what you may hold on to, and then it turns into a regular loan, they're going to need, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm hardly an expert on the PPP. Not only they're going to need more money for the program, right? I mean,
well, there's no doubt they need more money for the program. Again, this sold out quickly. And by the way, independent contractors, self-employed small businesses weren't even able to apply for the first week of it. They were only able to apply beginning last Friday. So they only had 4 days of applications before the program ran out of money. So I'm sure there's a lot of pent up, demand there. One of the problems of the way that the PPP was structured is that once you get that money in your hand from your local bank, you had to basically spend it in 8 weeks in order to get that forgiveness. There are a lot of businesses, as you're hearing, as you know, who are still closed, and they're not allowed to reopen, and their employers or employees are on unemployment, so they can't bring them back. There's nothing for them to do, and then they're faced with a situation where they can't even spend the money the way it's intended. So that's a problem. Again, running out of money obviously is a problem.
That's a big problem.
Yes. So, NJBIA and I think 60 other business groups, are in the process of reaching out to our congressional delegation to say, replenish the PPP, but let's make some changes. Let's make this 8-week period, maybe extend it to a longer period of time. Maybe don't start the 8-week period until a business is ready to reopen, so they have money to spend on their employees at that point. Again, it's a great program. It's going to help out a lot of businesses, but it wasn't specifically tailored for those small businesses who are shut and can't reopen, during this period of time.
Wow. We have just gotten a bunch of questions on this PPP program. So the first one is, have you heard of any small businesses receiving the PPP loan? And let me just read you some of, we received this. These are some questions that were posted on our open forum. I believe it was yesterday. One is, as of last night, no clients have received funding. About 10% have received follow-up requests or indication that the application is being moved to the next phase. And so that is, I've heard, like actually getting the money into the hands of businesses. I know I heard like 2 weeks ago that was a problem. Is it still a problem?
Yeah, well, again, initially, this is a new program, and it's being administered, by banks. There were a number of banks that were already participants working with the SBA, but then they opened it up to all banks. So there was a tremendous education process to do this. There was a flood of applications early. So you just imagine, again, thousands of businesses in New Jersey flooding, new banks who are just getting the guidance the night before as to how to do this, taking applications, trying to figure out who's eligible, who's not. Then they have to send the application to the SBA, who then has to approve it. They send back the money to the bank, and the bank then has 10 days to get the money out. So we have heard anecdotally there have been a few people who have gotten money. I'm not sure if that's officially, or maybe the bank has their good clients, have fronted the money, to them in anticipation. But it's a process. We heard the other day that some of our members were hearing from their banks that they've been approved and they can expect money any day now. So the process is working. Again, given that 8-week period of time, I know there are a lot of people who would rather not have the money right now. They'd rather have it in 2-3 weeks from now, but they're getting the money out, as soon as they can. Again, others need the money now because they may be in operation and they may need to make these payroll costs.
Right. Well, like you said, the whole thing was written in a week, and we can't say that this time Congress, was being sloppy or just didn't care. I mean, this was a new type of emergency of a very large nature. So we'll give the government a break on this one. Here's another question, and it's kind of technical, so you may not know the answer, and that's fine. So this came from one of our members. Can an owner of a single member LLC with employees use some of the funds from their PPP loan to take distributions?
If it's a sole proprietor, I believe they can on the LLC. They can't on on a corporate status, but an LLC, I think they will be able to do that. Again, one, hopefully they've applied to their bank already, or they're going to have to wait next time. But I would take that application, and we've gotten this question before, and I've talked to several other experts in this area, and if they're a sole proprietor, I think they are eligible. Again, it may depend on how they look at a distribution versus an income. So maybe they should ask some of that to your members, but I would absolutely apply and see what their bank says as to how much they think they're qualified for.
Got it. The PPP wants payroll reports, but what if you are the sole proprietor?
Again, and they're being a little bit more flexible. You may have to show your 990s if you're an independent contractor. You may have to bring in 2 years worth of tax returns if you're a sole proprietor. So there are going to be other ways they're going to look at. It's not just wages anymore for sole proprietors or independent contractors. They're looking at income as well as part of what they consider to be salaries and wages.
Okay, here's another one. For self-employed people, how will the recertification be done for the 8 weeks following funding? Will it be based on 2019, or does the owner need to take distribution to prove wages?
Again, and this may get a little bit complicated as to how they are structured, how they're taking the money. But again, generally for self-employed, they're going to be looking at your income as to how much you could borrow. And for forgiveness, they're going to be looking to see whether or not you're making, you can pay yourself that same amount of income as you had before, or maybe even, a little bit more. Again, you're limited as to how much you could borrow, and you can only be forgiven as, that amount of money.
Okay, got it.
Just maybe a slightly different scenario. I had a business call me yesterday. I think they're a restaurant and they're closed, and a lot of their employees are on unemployment right now, and they're about to get their money, and they were wondering how are they going to handle the 8-week period of time in paying their employees if their employees aren't working right now. And they asked the question, can they pay their employees higher levels of money, the disaster money or risk, I forgot what the right term is, for the last 4 weeks to make up for the first 4 weeks? And the answer is yes. The PPP does not, you have to pay them at least 75% of what you used to pay them before, but it doesn't prevent you from paying them more in order basically to entice them to come back or to spend out that money. So it probably works the same way for a sole proprietor.
Okay, I got one last question. Proceeds from the PPP will not be taxable. Will expenses paid from the forgivable loan proceeds be deductible? Another typical CPA question.
I'm not sure about the deductibility, but the loan forgiveness aspect of the PPP is not taxable income. So, it's not treated, other types of grant programs or monies that you get, can be taxable, but I'll defer to you folks. But the PPP loan forgiveness aspect is not a taxable event. So
Okay.
if you get $1 million in a loan and it's all forgiven, that's not taxable.
Okay, great. One last thing. We got this comment from a viewer, and maybe you can tell us what you think. This is a question. I have a number of clients that have received their money this past week. That's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Our clients that went to small local community banks have received their loans, while our clients that went to the larger banks have received their SBA number, but not actually received their funds. Have you heard the same thing? And if this is basically the thrust of this comment is correct, can you just maybe comment on why that has been the dynamic there?
Anecdotally, we're hearing the same things. We're hearing that the smaller community banks have done a better job, even though they're new to this program. They've done a better job of processing applications and submitting them, and therefore, getting monies back than maybe the larger banks have. I would only be speculating as to why that may be so, but I know a lot of the larger banks, again, who they may have been overwhelmed in the amount of applicants, that they were getting, and maybe their processes maybe aren't as nimble as some of the smaller banks are. But again, that's speculation, but anecdotally, we're hearing the exact same thing.
Okay. Well, that just about wraps it up for this broadcast. Ray, do you have any closing thoughts you want to share with our viewers?
Just that, again, we know that the PPP, is closed for applications now. Pay close attention, to what you're hearing from your association, from NJBIA and elsewhere, as to whether or not Congress is going to reauthorize it. If they do, we're hearing it's going to be $250 billion, which seems like a lot, but then $349 billion seem like a lot as well. And just be ready to go to your local bank and start the application process and get your foot in the door. And talk to your CPA as to which program may make the best sense for you.
Right. One last thing that I just thought of. Those who have an application in process, they should continue the process. Is that correct? Because
I think when they closed the system, they said they're out of money. It's based on what was in the door at that point in time. Now, it's possible that there may be. I'm not sure. Again, it was a certain amount of money, so they can spend more money than they otherwise had. Is it possible that maybe more people in the door than they actually have money to do that? Yeah, that's possible. But if you have an application in, continue with that process, and hopefully you'll be getting your money in the near future.
Okay. Well, we thank all of you for joining us today. Hopefully you found this helpful and informative. And we will continue to post updates on our website and social media, as well as to our open forum on our Connect site. And we hope to bring you more of these video sessions. So have a great day and stay safe and healthy. Thank you.